They say betrayal hurts most when it comes from someone you love. But I think it hurts more when it comes from someone who used to hold your hand when you were scared. That morning, I had no idea that betrayal was waiting for me like a predator crouched in the shadows. The sun had just begun spilling through the kitchen blinds, brushing golden streaks across our worn wooden floor. The smell of my mother's tortillas floated in the air, mingling with the faint aroma of coffee from the old percolator. Everything seemed ordinary, warm, even like any other day. But beneath that calm, tension pulsed invisibly, and I wouldn't realize it until the moment my life unraveled. Lucia was at the table, scrolling through her phone as if she owned the morning itself. Her long, dark hair fell over her shoulders, and she was humming softly, pretending to be absorbed in some meaningless post. She didn't even glance at me when I walked in, and that wasn't unusual. She hadn't looked at me properly in months. "Running late again, Sophia?" Her voice sliced through the quiet. Mocking sweet practice. I could hear the smile in it, the way she relished getting under my skin. I ignored her. I didn't need the drama, not yet. Not when my backpack was zipped tight, my essay carefully tucked inside, the one I'd poured my heart into. We went to the same school, Santa Maria High. A sprawling campus, half the students Latino, half a mix of every background. A place where gossip spread faster than the wind through the palm trees outside. Lucia was the star. Straight A's, captain of the dance team, nominated for homecoming queen. The perfect student, the perfect sister. Me. I was quiet. I scribbled poetry in my notebook while everyone else uploaded videos to TikTok, laughed too loudly, tried too hard. That morning I felt good. For once the world felt like mine. I had just received my graded essay. A big red A+ across the top. Maybe, just maybe, I was finally catching up to her. Maybe I had something worth noticing. But by noon, that fragile sense of joy would be shredded. The intercom crackled. Principal Hernandez's voice cut through the chatter of my classmates like a knife. "Students, please remain in your classrooms. We're conducting an urgent search. No one leaves." A hush fell over the room. My stomach twisted. I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Something about the tone, clipped, cold, made every nerve in my body scream. Minutes later, the principal walked in with the school officer, a clipboard in one hand and a small metal box in the other. He cleared his throat. "A school property item has gone missing. A staff iPad containing student data. We need to search everyone's bags." Laughter died instantly. Whispering eyes darted across the room, scanning for the guilty. When they reached me, I tried to smile. I had nothing to hide. My hands were steady, my heart racing, but I held it in. Then they unzipped my backpack. And my world froze. There it was, the missing iPad sitting on top of my notebook, the serial number scratched faintly across its metal back. I froze. My voice left me. "That's not mine," I whispered. The officer lifted it like it was evidence in a crime scene. "It's logged to the missing serial number," he said flatly, like there could be no argument. Faces turned toward me. Eyes widened. Whispered accusations darted through the room like sparks in dry grass. "Why would Sophia do that?" someone muttered. "She's never done anything like this," another voice said uncertainly. I shook my head violently. "I swear I didn't touch it. I don't even." The principal's face hardened. "You'll explain this in my office." And then I saw her. Standing at the doorway, perfectly poised, eyes wide with faux shock, lips pressed tight like she was concerned. But behind that mask of innocence I could see the gleam, the cold, precise satisfaction. She had orchestrated this. She had planned it. And she was watching me collapse. I wanted to scream. To run. To tell someone, anyone, that I was innocent. But words were useless. I followed them silently, the weight of the stairs suffocating me. In the principal's office my knees shook. My hands were clammy, my chest tight. The principal placed the iPad on the desk and looked at me like I had committed the worst crime imaginable. "Do you have anything to say, Sophia?" I didn't take it. I don't even." "You were seen with it in your bag," he said. I could see Lucia behind him, leaning against the wall, crossing her arms, her expression calm, unshakable. She had set the trap and I had fallen headfirst into it. That was the moment my life cracked in half. Back at home that night, the silence was heavier than any shouting could have been. My parents sat at the dining table, the expulsion letter between them like a wedge in their hands. My mother's hands trembled as she folded it over and over, trying to erase the words with the creases. "I never thought you'd do something like this," she said softly. I felt a lump rise in my throat. "Mama, I didn't. You have to believe me." My father didn't look at me. He just said, "Your mother and I trusted you. The school says there's video proof you had the iPad in your bag." "There was video," Lucia added from the corner, leaning back in her chair, her voice soft, convincing, poisonous. "But maybe someone set her up. It's just hard to believe this happened by accident." Her eyes met mine. Calm, steady, merciless. I realized then that she wanted this. She wanted me gone. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to my parents' muffled arguments in the next room. They thought I couldn't hear them. "No other school will take her. She's ruined our name," my father's voice snapped. My mother sobbed quietly. Me. I let the tears run silently down my face, tasting salt and betrayal, wishing I could vanish into the shadows. The days that followed were worse than the initial shock. Friends stopped texting. Teachers who once praised me avoided me. At the grocery store, at church, walking to the bus stop. Whispers, looks, judgment. "The girl who stole from school," they called me. The nickname trailed behind me like a storm cloud. Lucia thrived in contrast. She became more radiant, more popular, the perfect daughter who stood by her troubled sister. Or so she made everyone believe. One evening, I overheard her laughing on the phone, her voice carrying over the stairwell. "She totally lost it," she whispered, cruel and sharp. "I told you it'd work." And then she noticed me. Smiling, she said, "Go back to bed, Sophia. You've done enough damage." I punched my pillow until my knuckles hurt. The betrayal burned in me like acid. And at that moment I swore I would find the truth. I would prove my innocence, even if it took everything I had. The world didn't stop after that day, but I did. For weeks, I wandered through the halls of our neighborhood like a ghost. Santa Maria High was the same chaotic, vibrant place it had always been, but the warmth I once felt there was gone. Classrooms that had been safe felt like cages. Hallways that echoed laughter now echoed whispers. Every glance, every smirk, every sideways stare carved its mark into my chest. Even at home, the isolation was suffocating. My parents treated me like a fragile object, not with care but with suspicion. Every step I took was measured, every word weighed. I could hear the tension behind their voices, their quiet, careful whispers as if speaking normally might shatter them, or me. And then there was Lucia. She moved through the house like she owned it, radiant, untouchable. She laughed freely, a sound that once used to make me smile, now grating, poisonous. She strutted down the hallway with that familiar tilt of her head, tossing her hair, pretending she hadn't orchestrated the worst day of my life. Every glance from her was a reminder. I was a mistake, a ghost, a shadow of someone who once mattered. I stopped trying to explain myself to anyone. Words were useless. They believed the video. They believed the story. And deep down I feared they were right, or at least that no one cared enough to find out. School became a daily trial. I ate alone, avoiding the tables where whispers lingered like smoke. Teachers who had once smiled in encouragement now looked at me with the strained patience of someone dealing with an inconvenience. Friends I had laughed with in the past gave me polite nods or avoided me entirely. I was invisible. And yet the whispers never stopped. One afternoon I walked past the basketball court watching Lucia and her friends laughing under the bleachers. Marco was there too, leaning casually against the chain-link fence, arms crossed. I froze for a moment and a sudden fear gripped me. This was just the beginning. I was trapped in a web spun carefully, meticulously, and I was the only one caught. I retreated to the library, seeking refuge among shelves lined with stories of other people's lives. Lives untouched by betrayal, lives that seemed easier, safer. I buried my head in a book, tracing the words with my fingers, letting someone else's struggles fill the emptiness in my chest. But the words couldn't drown out the memory of that iPad, the whispers, Lucia's triumphant gaze. It was in that library, under the hum of fluorescent lights and the smell of old pages, that I realized something terrifying and exhilarating. I couldn't just sit here. I couldn't let her win. If no one else believed me, I had to find the truth myself. I didn't know how, but I would. Days turned into weeks and I began quietly observing, listening, remembering. I started noticing patterns. The way Lucia's friends lingered near my locker in the mornings. The way Marco always seemed to appear when she was planning something. the subtle glances she shot at me when she thought I wasn't looking. Every detail mattered. Every movement could be a clue. I started keeping notes, scribbling observations into a small leather notebook I hid beneath my bed. I wrote down conversations I overheard, patterns I noticed, anything that might one day prove my innocence. At first it felt futile. I was a girl alone, invisible, fighting ghosts. But then, slowly, a plan began to form. I thought about Marco. He had been hovering around school the day the iPad disappeared. He had to know something. And if I could somehow get him to speak, to let slip even a fragment of truth, I could start untangling the web Lucia had spun. But approaching him directly was impossible. He was cocky, dangerous in his arrogance, loyal to Lucia in ways I couldn't yet understand. So I did the only thing I could. I watched, I waited, I planned. At home, my parents' disappointment became a constant, invisible weight. My father avoided my gaze. My mother's eyes were full of sadness and confusion. I stopped trying to argue, stopped trying to defend myself. Every, "I believe you, Sophia," I imagined in my head felt hollow against the reality of their quiet mistrust. And yet I refused to give up. I couldn't. One evening as I sat on my bed, notebook open, scribbling notes in near darkness, I heard my phone buzz. A message from someone I hadn't expected. "Hey, I know what happened wasn't your fault. Diego." He had been one of the few classmates who had ever treated me like a person rather than a scandal. Funny, kind, a little nerdy but always genuine. And now, at a time when I had almost given up on everyone, he was reaching out. "Meet me tomorrow at Rico's Tacos. 4 p.m. I stared at the screen long after the message had disappeared. Rico's Tacos, a noisy little joint downtown, where the salsa music drowned out any real conversation. But it was perfect. Nobody would suspect, nobody would notice. The next day I arrived early, nerves coiled tight in my stomach. Diego was already there, hoodie pulled low over his face, sitting in the corner like a shadow. "I think I know who did it," he said quietly. I froze. My pulse jumped, my hands clenched into fists. "Who?" He leaned closer, eyes darting nervously. "Marco. You know him, the one who hangs out with Lucia's friends. He bragged about helping teach someone a lesson. Said Lucia paid him." My mouth went dry. "You're serious?" Diego nodded. "I didn't record it yet. But I can. I just need time." That night, for the first time in months, I slept with a spark of hope. Hope, though, was fragile. I knew Lucia would suspect, and once she did, she would move faster, strike harder. But now, for the first time, I felt a sense of purpose. A reason to exist beyond humiliation, beyond isolation. I was no longer a victim waiting to be crushed. I was a detective in my own story, a strategist in a battle I hadn't chosen but would not lose. I sat in my room that night, notebook open, listening to the distant murmur of the city beyond my window. Streetlights flickered over the rooftops, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch all the way into my heart. And I knew with absolute certainty that the path ahead would be dangerous. It would be long. It would test me in ways I couldn't yet imagine. But I also knew one thing. I would not let her erase me. Not now. Not ever. And in that quiet determination, amidst the whispers, the judgment, and the hollow stares, I found a strange, quiet strength. A strength I had almost forgotten existed. A strength that would carry me through the shadows. The city never sleeps, they say. And in Santa Maria, neither did suspicion. Every corner held a secret, every familiar face a potential liar. I learned that quickly, standing in the crowded hallways, my notebook clutched to my chest like armor. The whispers hadn't stopped, but something inside me had shifted. I was no longer a ghost. I was a hunter, tracking the truth through shadows and half-truths. Diego and I met after school as we had started doing, plotting our strategy over the rumble of passing buses and the scent of street tacos. Rico's Tacos became our clandestine headquarters. The owners, used to teenagers lingering in the corner booth, didn't care what we were doing as long as we bought chips and soda. "Marco doesn't know we're on to him yet," Diego whispered, sliding a notebook across the table. "But he's cocky. He talks too much when he thinks nobody's listening." I nodded, tracing the edge of the booth with my finger, imagining how I could catch him off guard. Every detail mattered. Where he went after school, who he met, the way his friends moved like sentinels around him. I was learning the rhythm of his life, and slowly the cracks began to show. Recording. Every word. I froze, feeling a wave of vindication but also a dangerous thrill. He had slipped. He had said too much. When we met later at Rico's, I could barely sit still. "Did you get it?" I asked, my voice trembling with both fear and excitement. Diego nodded. Every word. He even said Lucia gave him the money. $50 to plant the iPad. That's our start. I stared at the table thinking of Lucia. That smug, perfect face, the way she had orchestrated my humiliation. My chest burned with something I hadn't felt in months. Rage. Not blind anger but the focused kind that fuels strategy. The next step was riskier. We needed more than Marco talking. We needed proof, undeniable evidence. Diego suggested we follow him after school. I agreed, though my heart pounded at the thought of confrontation. I trailed him through the streets, careful to stay in shadows, my backpack a shield against discovery. Marco didn't notice at first, lost in his own arrogance, texting as he walked. That's when I saw it, a small, crumpled note slipping from his pocket as he leaned against the corner store. I didn't touch it, I couldn't. But Diego's nimble fingers snagged it, tucking it into his notebook. Later, in the quiet of my room, I unfolded it. The note was in Lucia's handwriting. "Make sure Marco deletes the video. If she finds out, we're dead." I read it over and over, heart hammering. It wasn't just a clue, it was a confession in code. It proved the conspiracy. Lucia's name written in ink, her planning laid bare. But nothing was simple. The deeper we dug, the more dangerous it became. Marco began noticing us. Subtle glances, a shadow lingering too long, a phone screen angled just so. One afternoon as I walked home through the quiet streets, a car slowed beside me. Marco rolled down the window, a sneer curling across his face. "You think you're smart, huh?" he said, voice low and dangerous. "Stay quiet. Lucia's family. Family protects family." And then he drove off. I was shaking, but I didn't tell my parents. They wouldn't understand. They couldn't. But the fear didn't break me, it hardened me. I realized that danger wasn't a deterrent. It was confirmation that we were close. Too close for them to ignore. In the following days, Diego and I became experts at stealth. We watched, listened, and recorded. Every snippet of conversation, every careless text, every slip of the tongue was carefully catalogued. Marco had no idea we were listening when he laughed with Rosa, one of Lucia's friends, under the bleachers. "Did you get it?" Rosa asked. "Yeah," Marco replied, smirking. "Lucia said make it land in her bag. She wanted her gone. I got it done. Easy $50. Diego's phone recorded every word. My hands shook as we listened back. Finally, after months of shame, humiliation, and isolation, the puzzle was coming together. But there were more shadows than I had realized. With every revelation, Lucia became more unpredictable. I started noticing subtle signs, her gaze following me across the room, the sudden silences when I entered the house, whispered phone conversations that stopped abruptly. She was aware now. She had begun to suspect. The next night, a small envelope appeared under my bedroom door. 4 words, written in familiar, venomous handwriting. "Stop digging. You'll regret it." I laughed bitterly. Her power was slipping, but she still wanted me afraid. I showed it to Diego. "That means we're close," he said simply. "Good. Keep going." Even as my body trembled from fear and adrenaline, I felt a spark of determination flare. That night, I stared out my window at the city lights, the distant traffic, the hum of life moving on despite my pain. I thought about all the humiliation, all the whispers, all the nights spent crying alone. And I made a vow, one that echoed in my chest like a drum. I would uncover the truth. I would expose them. I would reclaim everything they had tried to take from me. By the end of that week, the first clues had formed a roadmap. Marco was our key, Diego was my anchor, and Lucia's own arrogance was beginning to betray her. For the first time in months, I felt a dangerous mix of hope and fury. The shadows of isolation were still there, yes, but now they were mine to command. I would turn them into weapons. I would turn whispers into evidence. And when the time came, I would not just clear my name. I would make sure everyone who had doubted me, everyone who had rejoiced at my fall, understood exactly who I was. Because I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't weak. And I wasn't finished. The city felt different now. Every street corner, every familiar sidewalk, every crowded classroom became a stage for my silent war. I walked through Santa Maria High like a predator in plain sight, invisible yet calculating, always listening, always waiting. Diego and I had grown careful, precise, almost like spies. Rico's Tacos became our command center, a place where whispers became evidence and scribbled notes in my leather notebook became our roadmap to justice. Every day we uncovered something new, a glance, a phrase, a secret passed too casually. And with each discovery, the noose around Lucia's lies grew tighter. It started on a Thursday afternoon. I had stayed late in the library, pretending to work on a book report, while Diego followed Marco to the edge of the city park. He called me with an update. "He's meeting someone," Diego whispered into the phone. "Looks like he's passing something off. Could be the proof we need." I felt my pulse spike. The world seemed sharper, more alive. "Be careful," I said, my voice a whisper against the static of the line. Diego promised he would. I trusted him with everything. My plan, my safety, my sanity. He was the only one left who believed me. That evening I stayed awake until the house was quiet. My parents had long since stopped questioning me. Disbelief and resignation had taken the place of concern. Lucia, however, moved through the house like a queen surveying her kingdom. Every laugh, every casual toss of her hair, every phone call I overheard reminded me that she believed herself untouchable. I couldn't let her be. Not for myself, for my future, my name, my sanity. The breakthrough came 2 days later. Diego had managed to plant a small recorder in the bleachers where Marco and Rosa met after school. I remember the moment we listened to the playback together. Marco's voice rang clear. "Lucia gave me the money. $50 to plant it in Sophia's bag. She said she wanted her gone. Don't screw this up." Rosa laughed. "She'll never find out. Nobody will believe her." My hands shook. Every word was a dagger but also a lifeline. Proof. Confirmation. The tangible evidence that I had been telling the truth all along. But our victory was short-lived. Lucia was suspicious. That much was clear the next morning. She moved differently, glanced at me when she thought I wasn't looking, and even whispered into her phone in rooms I had just left. The predator had become aware of the hunter. And then came the first direct warning. A small envelope slipped under my bedroom door. Just 4 words. "Stop digging. You'll regret it." I stared at the paper, shaking, laughing bitterly through my fear. She was scared now, and that meant we were close. Diego saw it too. "That's a good sign," he said quietly. "Keep going. We're close." Over the next week we escalated. We recorded conversations, saved text messages, and traced patterns. Marco's arrogance worked in our favor. He talked too much when he thought no one was paying attention. One afternoon we caught a crucial piece. Marco was bragging to a group of friends outside the park. "Lucia wanted her gone. I just did what she asked. Easy money, man." Diego's recorder caught every word. My chest felt like it might burst. For the first time in months I felt vindicated. The truth was within reach. But danger lurked everywhere. The closer we got to exposing them, the bolder they became. Marco began tailing me once in a while, lingering too long outside the library, leaving messages on my locker that were threatening but vague. One night as I walked home alone, I saw a car slow beside me. Marco rolled down the window, sneer curling across his face. "You think you're smart, huh? Stay quiet. Family protects family." He drove off before I could respond. My hands were shaking, but my resolve only hardened. Fear would not control me. Diego and I spent hours compiling our evidence. Recordings, screenshots of messages, and witness notes. Every detail was important, every timestamp a weapon. It became clear. Our plan needed one final push. We had to expose everything at once, and we had to do it flawlessly. One afternoon I walked past Lucia, who was laughing with her friends in the courtyard. She glanced at me, eyes narrowed, a small smirk playing on her lips. For a moment I considered confronting her, yelling, throwing the truth in her face. But I knew better. Patience, precision, proof. That was my weapon, not anger. By the end of the week, the noose had tightened. Lucia was panicked. Her friends were uneasy, Marco was jittery. And I had every piece I needed to confront them with undeniable evidence. I sat in my room that night, notebook open, city lights glowing faintly through the window. The shadows no longer felt oppressive. They felt alive, charged with the promise of justice. Every whisper, every stolen glance, every secret we had collected was ready to explode. And when it did, the truth would come crashing down. For the first time in months, I felt powerful. Not vengeful. Not bitter. Powerful. I wasn't just reclaiming my name. I was reclaiming myself. And I would not stop until the web of lies had unraveled completely. The city skyline was streaked with the gold and crimson of sunset when I realized it was time. The noose had tightened, the clues were stacked in our favor, and the air itself seemed heavy with anticipation. I could almost hear it. The quiet hum of inevitability, the way the world pauses right before everything shifts. Diego and I had spent weeks preparing. Every recording, every screenshot, every witness note was catalogued and cross-referenced. We had rehearsed the confrontation in our heads so many times that it felt like a scene from a movie. Except this was real and the stakes were impossibly high. Lucia didn't know it yet, but tonight the scales would tip. The first move came from an unexpected source. Diego had arranged a casual study session at the library, where he and I could meet Marco under the guise of normalcy. Marco arrived, his cocky grin failing to mask the twitch in his eye. Something was off. He knew we were getting closer. "Hey," I said, smiling at him like we were friends. "Thanks for meeting us." Marco shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Diego. "Yeah, sure." We guided him to a corner table, pretending to work on homework. My heart thudded violently, each beat a drum signaling the moment of reckoning. "Marco," Diego began casually, "remember the iPad incident?" Marco laughed nervously. Yeah, that old thing. What about it?" I leaned forward slightly, letting the weight of my stare press down on him. "We know exactly what happened. Every detail. Every lie." Marco's eyes widened. He tried to recover, but sweat had already formed on his brow. Diego pressed play on the recorder, and the bleachers' conversation filled the library corner. "Lucia gave me the money. $50 to plant it in Sophia's bag. She said she wanted her gone. Don't screw this up." Rose's laugh echoed faintly as well. Marco's face paled. His bravado vanished. He stammered, I didn't, you can't." I didn't let him finish. The tipping point had arrived. That night, I lay in bed replaying the recordings in my head. The weight of the last few months, humiliation, whispers, betrayal, pressed down on me, but for the first time it felt manageable. The pieces of my life, scattered and broken, were beginning to fit back together. But even as I allowed myself a flicker of relief, I knew Lucia would fight back. She had always believed herself untouchable. She had counted on fear and silence to protect her. But she had miscalculated. I wasn't afraid anymore. The next day we went to Principal Hernandez's office. I felt the familiar tightness in my chest as we entered, my parents trailing behind us, faces etched with worry and exhaustion. Lucia walked in behind us, wearing her usual perfect smile, the one that hid the malice underneath. Diego and I presented the evidence. The recordings, the messages, the timestamps, the notes. Every piece was laid out meticulously. The room was silent, except for the hum of the air conditioner and the faint scribble of the principal taking notes. Finally, I looked at Marco, who was sitting rigidly in the corner. His earlier bravado had completely crumbled. The principal's eyes scanned the evidence, then lifted to Lucia. Her smile faltered. The room felt like it had shrunk. The air thickened. "Lucia," he said, voice cold and steady, "you orchestrated a deliberate act to frame your sister. You broke school policy and the trust of this family. You are expelled, effective immediately." Lucia's lips trembled. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I just wanted. You wanted her gone," I said softly, my voice steady. "You wanted to ruin me. And you almost did." Her head dropped, tears welling in her eyes. The perfect image she had cultivated for months, years, shattered. As we left the office, my parents walked behind me, their expressions a mix of relief, shame, and awe. I didn't look back at Lucia. She would have to live with what she had done, the consequences fully realized. Outside, the city felt lighter somehow, as if the shadows that had been suffocating me were finally lifting. Diego handed me a flash drive, a backup of all the evidence we had collected. "For insurance," he said with a small smile. I laughed softly, the sound foreign but freeing. "We won, Diego. We really did." He shrugged. "You never gave up on yourself. I just followed your lead." And in that moment I realized that this revenge, this reclamation of truth, wasn't about hurting Lucia. It wasn't about proving I was right. It was about reclaiming myself, my dignity, and my voice. For months I had been invisible. For months I had been silenced. But no more. As we walked away from Santa Maria High for the last time, I felt the city hum around me. Every street, every sidewalk, every whispering shadow now seemed like a testament to survival. I had faced betrayal at its cruelest, and I had emerged stronger, sharper, unstoppable. Lucia had lost her power. Marco had lost his arrogance. And I had reclaimed everything that mattered. My name, my truth, my freedom. Sometimes family doesn't break you. And sometimes the moment you hit the tipping point, you realize that the world you feared can be reclaimed. I had reached that tipping point. And now nothing, not fear, not whispers, not betrayal, could stop me. The first thing I noticed when I walked into my new school was the silence. Not the suffocating, judgmental silence I'd grown used to in Santa Maria High, but a calm, curious quiet. No whispers. No sideways glances. No eyes filled with doubt or malice. For the first time in months I felt like I could breathe. I enrolled in the creative writing program, the one I had always dreamed of joining but had been too afraid to pursue. The classrooms smelled of fresh ink and books, the walls lined with stories waiting to be told. And for the first time I belonged somewhere that had nothing to do with scandal or betrayal. My parents were quiet but proud when I told them I had been exonerated. My mother hugged me so tightly that I could feel every ounce of pain I'd carried melt away. My father, usually stoic, had tears in his eyes as he said, "We believed in you, Sophia. Even when everyone else didn't." It wasn't just vindication. It was healing. Lucia's punishment had been swift. Expelled from Santa Maria High, she was sent to live with our aunt in Arizona. She tried reaching out once, a simple text. "I'm sorry. I hate what I did." I didn't reply. Not because I wanted revenge, but because forgiveness isn't given to someone who hasn't faced the truth fully. And Lucia hadn't. Not yet. I realized that my revenge, my justice, had never been about humiliation. It had been about reclaiming my voice, my dignity, my life. And now I could finally do that without fear, without anger clouding my thoughts. Diego remained my quiet anchor throughout the aftermath. Together we archived all the evidence, stored it safely on a flash drive, a tangible reminder of our struggle and eventual victory. "In case anyone ever tries to question what really happened," Diego said one afternoon, handing me the flash drive. I smiled at him. "Thanks, Diego. For believing me when no one else did." He shrugged, modest as ever. "You didn't give up on yourself. I just followed your lead." And it was true. I hadn't. School life slowly began to feel normal again, though I carried the lessons of betrayal like a map etched into my skin. Every friend who returned, every teacher who apologized, every whispered, "I'm sorry," felt like a bridge being rebuilt, brick by brick, toward trust, toward safety, toward a life that was mine again. I even began writing again, pouring my experiences into stories that were raw, honest, and unapologetic. It wasn't just therapy, it was transformation. Every word reminded me that my past didn't define me. I defined me. Months later I stood once more at the gates of Santa Maria High, not as a victim but as someone who had endured, learned, and survived. Diego was beside me, handing me the last set of recordings, neatly organized and secured. "It's all here," he said with a smile. "Just in case." I nodded, feeling the weight of months lift off my shoulders. "I don't think I'll ever need it," I said softly. "But it's comforting to know it's here." We said our goodbyes to the familiar streets and classrooms, knowing we had closed a chapter but opened an entirely new one. One of self-respect, empowerment, and hard-earned wisdom. Sometimes late at night I still think about that day, the iPad in my bag, the whispers, the humiliation. But now when I do, I don't feel weakness or fear. I feel strength. I feel clarity. I feel alive. Lucia had lost her carefully curated life. Her popularity, her friends, her control. And I had gained everything that mattered. My voice, my truth, and the freedom to be me. I realized then that true redemption wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about punishment. It was about reclaiming yourself after being broken. I didn't just clear my name. I rewrote my story. They tried to erase me. But all they did was make me unforgettable. And in that unforgettable life I had finally found peace.